I think that Mark may have misspoken a little bit. I don't know that that discussion to ask me to speak tonight occurred before he had been turned down by several other speakers. In fact, that was my first question to Mark and Jim when they asked me to speak here this evening, was to say, how desperate actually are you at this point? Because some of you will know this, it's been 13 years since I gave up the formal practice of infectious disease pathology and toxicology, and to paraphrase the famous St. Louis Cardinals catcher Tim McCarver, and those of you who know me and know that I'm a Cubs fan know how rare it is for a Cubs fan to talk about baseball in October. But to paraphrase Tim McCarver, what I recall about those disciplines is that they were really hard. And so I'm not sure that I have a lot that is useful to say to you this evening, although the good news for all of you is that I've just returned from a couple of weeks in Europe, so it's 4 a.m., so it's unlikely that I will draw out what little I have to say. This event over the past the 4 years of this colloquium has become quite an event. And Jim recapped a bit of the history of this. But if you went back to 2007, we had just finished a research colloquium on issues in Africa under Hank Gardner's leadership. And Jim was relatively new to CSU. We were working on this internationalization plan. And one of the ideas that he really wanted to push forward was the idea of this colloquium that caused all of us as individuals and as an institution to look at important issues across our disciplinary boundaries and to look at them new questions in new ways and in ways that really caused us to cut across the silos that too often define our existence. And as we all know at an institution, there are very interesting things that happen whenever we can break out of those boundaries. If you look back over the 4 years of this colloquium, as Jim recounted for you, we've talked about issues like sustainability, the growth and opening of China, international conflict, and this year we look at the topic of health writ broad, health across our species, health across our ecosystems, health, of course, across our disciplines. And I think it's possible that someday the organizers of this conference will learn to think big about questions and we'll take on some large issues. I can't, of course, mention the organizers without adding my thanks to all the people who are responsible for pulling off an event of this scope. And as you look at the program for this entire event, it's apparent that a lot of people are putting in a great deal of effort on this. And we should acknowledge, of course, the leadership of Dean Stetter and of Vice Provost Jim Cooney and their teams in putting this event together. It's been a great job for all of you. And as Jim mentioned, next week, or a couple of weeks from now, we'll receive the 2013 Paul Simon Award for Outstanding Campus Internationalization, and that is due in no small part to Jim and his entire group. So congratulations again on that. So that's the good news. But for all of the successes that this event has had, this year's topic, I would suggest, reminds all of us that we will not resolve the great challenges of our day simply, quickly, or without sustained effort across many generations. In fact, I was reflecting on this a bit 4 nights ago as I was trying unsuccessfully to sleep in what was now a hotel room converted from a cave at the UNESCO World Heritage Site in Matera, Italy. Now, to those of you who have been to this site, you know that over 2,000 years, there has been continuous human habitation on this site. It was centered originally around a deep natural water source, which was very attractive to the population. The canyons in the area allowed people some protection as they lived in these natural caves that were there. And over the centuries, the dwellings were developed virtually vertically on top of each other. Now, when you combine this vertical style of construction around this single attractive feature of a water source. You mix in less than perfectly engineered sanitation systems. You co-house the livestock that were so important and such a valuable asset to these people. And you have created, if not ideal, close to ideal conditions for virtually every infectious disease pathogen. And over the centuries, most of them have taken advantage of that, from the plague back in the areas in the times of the Black Death to very recently, a cholera epidemic as recently as 62 years ago that in 1950 caused the Italian government to execute the forced evacuation of this site, ending that human habitation in that site for the first time in thousands of years. Now they've reopened it and started to redevelop the area, but if you're an infectious disease pathologist, sleeping in one of those caves causes one's mind to wander, and I'll be honest that I did not sleep well that evening. Now I've lost my place, of course. But that topic, I think, is illustrative, along with the fact that we can come up with a list of things like SARS, avian influenza, swine flu, West Nile virus, mad cow disease, AIDS, tuberculosis, and recently, very close to home, the resurgence of rabies. All of these are infectious disease outbreaks that have occurred essentially since the National Institutes of Health rather infamously declared that infectious diseases were largely cured, and we were now essentially in mop-up operations of that sort of activity. My own personal academic history has a tiny bit to do with this story. I left the pharmaceutical industry in part because the company that I was with had assigned me to a project in developing renal-sparing antibiotics, and that project was terminated because it was thought that there was no substantial need for new antibiotics going forward. So I went to academia, which I viewed as a source of easier funding, I guess. It's not quite clear to me in that. But all of these issues ought to serve as very stark reminders of how substantial the challenge that we're talking about at this colloquium is. Of course, these zoonotic diseases, those transmitted from animals to humans, are by no stretch of the imagination the only issues that we all face. Many universities across the globe shut down their radiation biology programs only to be reminded by situations like Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and Fukushima that the demand for this type of expertise remains today and as every bit as important as it has been. The mixture of environmental public health threats created by situations such as earthquakes in Haiti, tsunamis in Southeast Asia, and hurricanes in New Orleans remind us that the fuel for human tragedy comes in many forms, recruiting allies as it rolls along. And so if we today understand the backdrop and the scope of this challenge, if we acknowledge that it deserves our very best efforts, and if we know that we need to learn from the past, from what we've done right and what we have done wrong, then where does that leave us today in finding new ways to support the global health of humans, animals, and our planet as a whole? The Global One Health Initiative is, as you've heard, and I'll quote again here, a worldwide strategy for expanding interdisciplinary collaborations and communications in all aspects of healthcare, close quote. Essentially, what we're talking about is advancing 21st century medicine through accelerated research discoveries, enhanced public health initiatives, improved education and clinical care, and the expansion of the scientific knowledge base. Now, this effort is backed by the AVMA, the AMA, the CDC, and the USDA, but despite all of those acronyms, I would suggest to you, it's not all that complex an idea. It's an integrated approach to public health. It is, and again I'll quote, the collaborative effort of multiple disciplines working locally, nationally, and globally to attain optimal health for people, animals, and the environment. And again, this is not a new concept. Hippocrates argued that our health is related to the health of the environment. The interplay of animals and humans and disease has been known essentially since the dawn of germ theory. The roots of One Health itself go back over the last half century, and in the last 30 years, as we've mentioned, about 75% of emerging infectious diseases in the human population have been zoonotic diseases. In the 1980s, epidemiologist Calvin Schwabe began calling for a more unified approach to the understanding and treatment of human and animal diseases. In the wake of the 2001 anthrax attacks, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease created the National Biodefense Network, and CSU is the home to this region's node on that network. CSU itself, in 2004, launched the Infectious Disease Initiative, which led in no small part to the supercluster concept of 2005. And during those years, we were in very active discussions with leadership in the federal government, which at that point in time were in their offices, working about ways to more actively tie together the human health reporting systems of CDC and the animal health reporting networks. So these efforts have been ongoing for quite some time, but despite all of them, it's clear that our work isn't done, as anyone who reads Morbidity and Mortality Weekly will tell you. And let's be honest, who doesn't read that? Which brings us back to the One Health initiative of today. As Mark and Jim have pointed out, in 2007, the AVMA and the AMA adopted a common vision in support of this One Health concept. They launched an initiative task force that has grown to embrace collaboration around issues of global development, national security, food security, among others. The concept has been embraced by countries and scientists worldwide. But an idea like One Health takes form and substance not when it's drawn up on paper or talked about at a podium, but when it becomes truly embedded in centers of action, in universities like Colorado State, where we're uniquely positioned, in part by our land-grant university heritage and our programs of excellence, to make real and lasting contributions to the areas that are, in fact, the true focus of global health. CSU's One Health initiative has taken shape, as you've heard, largely under Mark Stitter's leadership. And I think Mark has done an outstanding job of reaching out to all the colleges to make connections, to develop this concept and implement it effectively and comprehensively. And I think it speaks to the special nature of CSU that there's not a single college within this university that doesn't have people working on this entire issue of, as Mark said, feeding the world while advancing human, animal, and ecosystem health. This university has been and continues to be a worldwide leader in many of these areas that make up One Health. We're working on complex problems that require multifaceted solutions from disciplines ranging from veterinary medicine, the basic sciences, environmental toxicology, infectious disease, wildlife biology, food production, ecosystem science, entrepreneurship, and even the role of disaster response. So for CSU, a One Health initiative makes sense. It plays to our strengths. And we know that locally and globally, the world faces some very big challenges in the years ahead. To meet those challenges more effectively, it will be very important for scientists to work together across disciplines, across campuses, across organizations. While the white Chevy pickup with the CSU logo on it at the Hobanil Experiment Station deep in the Yucatan jungle might remind us of the reach of CSU around the world in infectious disease, it's also true that the fact that one can stand next to a strip of tarmac in the Masai Mara and less than 24 hours later, in the same shoes, be walking in a heavily populated global food production center with whatever microbes your personal ecosystem decided to bring along, protected only by a footbath system and a voluntary system of disclosure, ought to remind us of the tremendous global reach that pathogens have. So what this ought to say to us is that no matter our strength as an institution, we'll need partners. And the One Health program promotes such collaboration. It promotes it in areas ranging from international collaborations to grant writing that can further our efforts in these areas. It positions us to partner and work more closely with government and with industry to focus not just on the science, but on the policy, the educational and the behavioral changes that will be needed to really have a global impact. We can also bring our strategic partners with universities across the world to play in this area and make a difference as well. CSU has always helped to make a difference in improving the lives of people and animals, and it will, I would suggest, be important for us to take a leadership role in helping to solve the next generation of these complex problems as well. We have the faculty, the facilities, and the history to build something significant by moving forward around the One Health initiative. Now, I'm going to close my remarks this evening with a reflection from my father. And by way of background, this was a man who barely graduated from high school, who rarely left the Illinois county where he was born, and whose libertarian philosophies would have made him immensely distrustful of cross-governmental agreements to work on global health. So he seems like an odd man to be quoting around this sort of topic. But he had an observation that he used to make that I think should be have a lesson in it for us tonight. He used to say, I'm not sure that thinking and talking ought to be verbs because too often they don't do anything. Now, usually that was before he assigned all of us some manual labor, so I admit it may not be as deep when he said it as the way I'm interpreting it now. But in a real sense, that's a challenge for us tonight, isn't it? How do we take the good intentions and ideas from this colloquium, from this very comfortable room, and move them out to the field, to the One Health battlefield, if you will? How do we hold ourselves accountable for making the differences that are within our power to make today? This is the challenge, and it's not just for our colloquium organizers, it's for each and every one of us. How do we move forward from here and build action on the foundation of good intentions in the years to come? Make no mistake, future generations will hold us accountable for what we've done and what we haven't done, because they will know we knew how to make a difference. We do know how, and so we should. Thank you all for being here this evening.